Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art School Live with me, Charlie Easton. You'll be wondering where Eric is. Eric is on a flight somewhere right now, and I am delighted to be here pinch hitting for Eric today. Today, we've got a wonderful artist who you may know from previous Art School Live shows. We've got Mandy Theis, who's going to be coming on today. And she is going to teach us something that we all should know about. Mandy, are you there?
I am here. So I'm going to try something new today and work digitally. I took your comments to heart from the last time of not being able to see very well, and I'm hoping this setup works for everybody. And we're going to be talking about how to paint glass. What are the main concepts behind painting glass so you can make really believable glass in your paintings?
Right on. Well, let's get this show rolling.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rose. Now, here's your host, Eric Rose.
Hang on, I saw the background there. Wait a minute. We got to get this going. There we go. We've kicked Eric out. We've got the lunatics running the asylum today, guys. So we're going to talk to Mandy, and as she said, she's going to talk to you about how to paint glass. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name's Charlie Easton. You can check out my work at 𝗠𝗶𝘁𝗵.com or on Instagram at Charlie Easton. I have co-hosted Acrylic Live with Eric. I've done a bunch of stuff at the Plein Air Convention, and I'm thrilled to be guest hosting for this show for the next week because I get to hang out every morning with not just all of you fine folks, but also with some really great artists. And Mandy, I've only met via this forum of Art School Live, seeing her videos, and you should check out the back catalog. She's done some great stuff on like color directions and shifts. She's done some cool stuff on painting figures, loads of interesting demonstrations. And so I'm pumped to see what she's going to talk about today, and also how she's going to do it. She's going to do it digitally. And I don't know how many of you watched the digital painting tutorial that went on Saturday, but there was tons of good stuff in there. So Mandy, I'm going to throw this over to you. So you got the most amount of time to talk to us about painting glass, and you're going to do it digitally.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's delightful to work with you here today. So I want to address a few elephants in the room before I even get started. One is that those of you who've worked with me before know that I despise photography or working from photography. However, I am also trying a new teaching technique where I'm trying to make it easier for all of you to see what I'm doing. So I'm doing two things here. You guys are seeing my screen, and I'm going to have this photo reference for you, but I am also looking at this actual object, and I'm making a lot of decisions based on the actual object. And I'll talk about anything that I see that's different between the actual object and what you're seeing in this photo reference as I go. But because I'm using a photo reference, I wanted to give you the most accurate representation of what I was actually seeing. And you can see here that there's two different photos. This photo over here is the default of what my camera gives us, right? And it's very different from how I've adjusted it to be closer to what I'm observing. It's still not perfect, but I want to talk about the difference. A camera loves averaging the values, the lights and darks. It tries to keep an even spread of values. That's how it's programmed. These digital cameras, their default settings are programmed. And because of that, you can see that they're giving us a lot. Let me switch to red so this is like super obnoxious and obvious. They're giving a lot more values in here, these kind of grays in the glass. But when painting glass is transparent. And what that means is that we are seeing through it to the background. So there's two things happening here. It's lightening this whole background. This is a deep, deep black color, but the camera wants to average the value. So it's lightening it quite a bit compared to this is much closer over here to the value that's behind the glass. And you can see that I've adjusted the photo back here to better show that the glass is transparent. There's still some issues. We're going to be using this photograph today. This is the adjusted one. So this is the adjusted one, and this is the original here. You get to see my terrible handwriting. I blame my dad for my handwriting. So I want to just point out a few things that cameras do that if you do ever work from a photograph, that you want to keep an eye out for. But again, I'm very anti-working photograph. I'm actually working from observation today, but this photograph is the reference for you all to see what I'm looking at. But we're getting more milkiness here than is actually showing. It's especially exaggerated here. And something else that camera tends to do because of the way the lens works is that it will take a horizon line and kind of make it wonky, right? And you can see that I've adjusted that over here to be a little more of a straight edge. So these are just a couple things to look out for if you are working with the camera. If, you know, whatever your constraints are today, I'm working a little bit with the photograph to help clarity for this demo. But, you know, be aware that your eyes, you have two eyes. You're seeing three-dimensionally. You are seeing massive amounts of information out there in the world. And when you're looking observationally, you're translating that to a 2D canvas, or a camera is translating to a 2D canvas. But either way, if you're doing it, you're taking out massive amounts of information to make it a 2D object. And so is the camera. But which one gives you more choice? Which one gives you more control? I much prefer choosing what to edit out than letting a camera edit it out for me. And that's why it's common for classically trained painters to be able to tell when somebody's working from a photograph. You'll get things like milky midtones. You'll get things like wonky horizon lines when people are working from a photograph versus working from life. So if you are one of those people that works from photography and you want to make a transition to life painting, I hope this demo helps you today. If you really like working from photographs and want to continue doing that, I'm hoping that you get some hints on how to control your photographs a little more tightly to be more in control of the choices being made. Okay, so without too much further ado, I'm going to take away the one that we are not using today, and we are going to start working from glass. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out about this image today. One is that we have ellipses in this cup. Now, I did a whole demonstration a week or two ago on ellipses on Art School Live, so I'm not going to get too into it today, but if what I'm saying about ellipses is confusing or frustrating or you're a little bit lost, I encourage you to go back to that episode where I was showing ellipses on a vase. But the main thing that you need to know about ellipses is that our eye height is up here. And whenever you have a circle, it's going to be flatter the closer it is to that eye height, and it's going to be more open. Do you see how this circle is much more open than the circle up here? So the idea is that the further away from your eye height, so you know here this would be very closed. It's going to be a little bit more open, a little bit more open, a little bit more open, a little bit more open. And you can see that the further away from your eye height, the more open the ellipse is going to be. So that's the main point about ellipses. And I give a whole hour demonstration on Art School Live a week or two ago. I encourage you to check that out. Okay, but today we're not focused on ellipses. We're focused on glass. And the thing about glass is that it's transparent, right? We're not actually painting glass. Instead, what we're going to do is we are painting a constellation of highlights. We do not have to paint the glass. We have to paint what's behind the glass and the highlights on the glass. And what I mean by that is that we have some pretty key major highlights. We have one here, 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 a skinny one back here. We have, you know, a couple, oops, I accidentally switched. You know, we have a couple highlights here. Here, maybe just a little bit along the rim. But overall, we're painting a constellation of highlights, and it's going to read as glass. Now, we also have a little bit of metal, which is treated differently on the top here. But overall, what we want to think about is that we aren't painting glass, we're painting what's behind the glass. And a little bit about glass is that, you know, we have a round object. Oops, what did I do? We have a round object. So what's happening is we're seeing really clearly through most of the glass, but as the glass gets more concentrated and as we see the edges, that's when the glass is reflecting onto itself and creating a little bit of density on these sides. So the middle part is mostly transparent with just a highlight. And these edges here are a density of glass that is actually creating its own mass that we can start to see and becomes a little bit white. So we're painting highlights, we're painting a little bit of glass density, but most importantly, look what I can do when I have the thought process that glass is transparent. I have this background, I have this background color here. And look, if I start going over this glass, it goes right into the background. So I'm doing something right here. And, this background just ekes right out, through the glass because the glass is transparent. So the 3 keys to painting glass is it's a constellation. I'm having a hard time with words today. It's a constellation of highlights that we're painting what's behind the glass to show its transparency. And that the only time we're actually painting the glass is when we're seeing the very edges of the glass where it gets really condensed, when it starts reflecting onto itself and creating this kind of milky effect. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start this painting a little differently than I usually start paintings because it's such a dark background. And because we're painting glass that's transparent, I'm just going to go ahead and fill in a black shape here. Now, I also have on the School of Atelier Arts, so some of you may be familiar with my online art school. On my School of Atelier Arts channel, I have a whole thing on why black is not a color. It's actually a really, really dark red, orange, yellow, green, blue, or purple. But when you're painting digitally, do you see how everything's being changed by how much black is added to it, right? Like this is red and it's just adding black. It's not giving me the option to make a colorful black. It's making just like this really neutralized black. So I want to give it just a little bit of color. So I'm going to use a little transparency and a really, really dark red to just give a little vibrancy to this black. I don't want a dead black. I don't want to feel like I'm being sucked into a black hole. Now, this may not seem really obvious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off. This is without that little bit of red glaze. This is with. This is without, and this is with. And do you see how it just livens up that black? We don't want dead blacks in our paintings. Okay, so now I'm just going to clean up a little bit because I don't want this. I just want to clean up this edge a little bit. I don't want to be distracted by, a super wonky edge. Now, I'm somewhat new to painting digitally. Again, I'm trying this out as a way to better give you a better visual on some of these techniques that we're talking about. So I appreciate your patience as I explore this new way of painting. It's not like you can just mix the exact color you want on your palette. You have to do a lot more layering when you're working in this digital realm. Okay. So I have that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer here. And I'm just going to do a tiny bit of drawing, showcasing, some few marks. Now, I'm not going to draw every little detail, but I do want to generally create the proportion that I want. So for example, I'm going to get a new layer here. Oh, I was on a new layer. Okay. So I'm asking myself, how tall versus how wide is this object? So if it's, let me get my transparency back up. So our object is approximately this tall and approximately this wide. Now, if I were working from life, which I am, you can't just take a ruler and measure how wide this is versus how tall it is, right? So what you would do if you're working from life is I would take my paintbrush or a pencil and I would measure using, locking your arm out with the pencil in front of you. I would measure what this vertical is. And then what I would do, let me get a new layer because this is one cool thing that I can finally show you guys better using digital tools. So this is my vertical. This is how tall my cup is, right? And here now, this is what I do with my pencil, but I can actually show you digitally now. I'm just going to rotate it, right? And I'm going to move it at the edge. And what I'm asking myself now is I'm going to call this 0 and this 100. So this 0 at the beginning, 100 here. Where is this width hitting? Is it 0? Is it 100? Is it 50? Is it above 50? Is it below 50? And so I hope you guys are giving me some really great answers in the chat. I always encourage you, play along. There's passive learning and active learning, right? And the more engaged you are in your learning, the more you'll remember and take away from this lesson.
It's 75. It's 75. That's what it is.
All right, 75. I'll buy it, right? And so how does that help me? Well, what I can do is, I can make the height, oops. Let me get a new layer here. I can make a height, and it can be this tall or it can be this tall, right? We're working proportionately. And as long as my width is comparable to my height, I'm okay. Now, in this case, I'm going to approximate the same size of what I see. But I'm taking this height, and then I'm going to do the same thing, right? I'm going to make a duplicate. I know how to do this. Oh, I know how to do this. Okay. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to take this and rotate it. And I am going to say, okay, it's about 75%. So I'm going to make a mark about 75%, and I'm going to erase the part I don't need. So this is, those of you who have seen my other tutorials, when I'm saying find the proportion, this is the thought process. This is what I'm doing, okay? So we have a general proportion. This is slightly bigger than what I'm looking at, and that's fine. As long as you maintain the proportions, you'll get a believable end project. All right, so we have the proportions, our height versus our width. It's approximately 75% as wide as it is tall. I'm going to pick a different color here, and I'm just going, because this has so many ellipses, I'm going to make a guide where my top ellipse I know is pretty closed and my bottom ellipse is much more open, right? Now, these are just kind of marks to help us. And we can do other proportionate things too. Like if I want to know where the bowl of the cup meets the stem, I can play the same game, right? Let's say down here is 0 and up here is 100. Well, this bowl is about halfway, right? So if I find the halfway mark on my vertical, I know that the bowl is going to be approximately here, and that my cup is going to, that wasn't a very good approximation. Okay. That my cup is going to be approximately like this, right? We have a stem, that's doing something like this. And I'm not worried about aggressively drawing this perfectly, because this is just a guideline for me. This is what I'm thinking in my head, because what we're actually going to end up doing is make a constellation of highlights. And I'm going to show you this trick that I hope is going to blow your mind, because the first time I ever saw it or thought about this way of painting from constellations, right? Just like stars. So we're going to use these highlights as stars. So I'm going to erase kind of all this stuff over here. Oops, I need bigger, just so we can, clear what's happening here. Oops. I'm going to take that off as well. Okay. So, we have a clear vision here. We have an idea of what our cup is looking like, but what we're going to start off with is just marking, constellations. So there's a really famous constellation called Orion. I don't know, for those of you who are into this kind of thing. Oops, I want it up here. If any of you are familiar with stars, Orion is famous for these like 3 stars that go in a diagonal, and his hands are like up here. This is the constellation, right? But we can make our own constellations as artists, and it's called drawing from the spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify, a few key highlights on here. The side is important. There's a little one here, maybe here, right? And if I take away the underlying image, right, this is just a constellation. This isn't so different from, the Orion constellation that we gave in as an example. And what I'm seeing is kind of a race car. Like if I kind of connect these, it looks like a race car with a pointy nose to me, right? So I just made up my own constellation. But if I take away those extra lines I just did, right, this is the constellation of our cup. So all I need to do is recreate this constellation over on our painting here. And I'm going to do this in white just to show the highlights. So let me bring back our cup here. And Charlie, you're going to have to keep me on track timing wise because I
Yeah, for
can't
sure.
see.
You probably got about, I don't know, 25 minutes, half an hour.
Amazing. Amazing. It is quicker working digitally as well, right? So
It's also, we can see exactly what you're talking about. It's great.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Yeah, I feel like, I was coming into this and I'm like, well, I've never taught a live lesson digitally before, but YOLO, right?
There you go. I think, what's cool about this is I think so many people have got into working with like Procreate, Photoshop, and all the rest of it, and you're giving a new side to it. So I think I can see in the chat, everyone's appreciating this this demonstration style.
Yay. Okay. Well, I feel like if you're not failing at least 10% of the time, you're not taking enough risks. And I'm glad that this risk is working out today.
There you go.
Okay, so we have these constellation ideas. So now I'm just marking them with a generic white. So we have one over on this rim. We have one kind of over here. Am I on a new? Before I'm going to do this on a clean layer. I like to have lots of layers when I work because I like to be able to show you back and forth different things. Okay, so we have one over here. We have a major one. It's a little over on this side. We have one here. We have kind of a fatter one here. We have a highlight down the side. That might have been a little big. It's a little shorter. We kind of have on the rim here a little something going on with a dot over here. And I'm trying as much as possible to recreate this constellation, so every time I'm putting a dot down, I'm triangulating it. I'm asking, what's the distance from that dot? What's the distance from this dot? What's the distance, between these two, right? So I'm really trying to maintain this idea of working from the spot, which is what it's sometimes called, or working, in terms of a constellation. Okay, so this is our idea for the glass. This is a little flatter on top here. Now I'm going to take off the other things, right? And we're just going to, do you see how we've built this constellation that's going to start giving us all the key information for proportion and other parts about our cup here? Now, we haven't really dealt with color. We're just laying down some highlights right now. But you can see that we're starting to achieve some key points in our painting that we're getting, obviously, the translucency. So we have some of these key spots. I only worked on the top, so I'm going to put a few key spots on the bottom as well here for us. So I'm going to go back to the red because it's obvious down here. So now we have kind of these, two little friends, these little twinsies down here. We have a little, some of these are skinny. I'm using a fatter thing. I can always make it skinnier later. We have a little bit down the side. We obviously have some bigger highlights here that are showing the bowl. And technically this is the density of the glass, but it's so dense towards the bottom that it's creating the same value as a highlight, and the same down here. Okay, now I'm ignoring some of this transparent glass. Like really the whole bowl will eventually have some value in it. We're not seeing through all of it, but these are some keys to give us, the shape that we need. I'm going to also extend this highlight on the top because it really is this whole rim going across here. It's skinnier than I have it, but the same thing's happening on the front rim just for a bit here. And that's going to help us define that shape. And again, we have some really skinny highlight here and here, and then down the space. All right. So we're still building our constellation, and we have some shadow too. Do you see this edge of shadow on this rim that's darker than what's around it? I haven't really dealt with the ground plane at all over here, and I'm going to have to do that at some point here. So let's bring back our kind of guidelines. Okay, so I have guidelines. I'm going back to the layer with my highlights, and I'm going to start adding some more of these constellation bits, right? So we have kind of this thicker highlight coming up here. We have a little bit of definition down here. We have some, this one's a little bit bigger than that one. We have two kind of twinsy things going on down here. I have to be very careful when I teach high school because my students always see things that are not intended. I was teaching a high school lesson the other day and I made a gesture which I didn't realize at the time, and it was very bad. I'm still cringing about that.
Keep gesturing away. You're not on camera right now.
Excellent. Key point here, not on camera. Okay, so we have a little bit here. I'm realizing that on my yellow drawing that I made it just a little bit fatter than what I actually have, or it's like a little skinnier, that this highlight is actually over here. So I'm going to make that drawing correction and kind of the same over here. Let's just clean that. Oops. It's going to clean that up a little bit. So, I did a fast, quick drawing, but actually the space is a little bit wider than I have. So let me correct that down here so that we aren't confused by it. This is actually a little bit wider.
And just to, there's been a few people asking on the chat, you're using Procreate for this, using a stylus on an iPad. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. So I love Procreate. To be fair, I haven't tried a lot of the others, but I found that, it's the most like actual painting works, with the exception of color. We're not really talking about color today. But the thing that frustrates me about all the digital programs that I've had is that if you want a chromatic neutral, like let's say you want to darken this red. So here's some red and you want to darken it. Your choices are to only add basically black, right? So this is the choice it gives you. So if you want to have what's called a chromatic neutral and darken it, what you really need to do is layer in with some transparency. So I'm going to layer in, oops, that was too light. Layer in some with transparency. And then if I want some more color in there, maybe go to, this dark orange over here and like kind of layer. That's too much. It's better if I try to match an exact color, but you have to build colors with the red, yellow, and blue together to get those colorful neutrals. It's all the neutrals. There's a tendency to make neutrals really grayed out in Procreate because that's the default choice, and you have to be like super on it to make sure that you're taking the time to layer up on your colors. But that's a lesson for that's a lesson for a different day. Today we're mostly working in values, right? There's a little bit of color on here, but we're mostly creating this with values. All right, so back to our main event here. Okay, so we have some, oops, am I on the right layer? Yeah, the other thing too is that you have to get used to working in layers, and sometimes you mess it up and then you're on the wrong layer and it's frustrating. Oh, that's because my transparency is down. Okay, so let's try, there we go. And we have kind of 2 dots here. We have kind of this 3 stripe situation up here, a little bit here. Okay, so let's take a look at where we are now. I'm going to erase that because I accidentally used it on the same layer. So I'm going to erase this here. And let's take away our blue. Okay, so do you see how the cup is starting to emerge on us? And all we've done is the constellation of highlights and allowed the cup to be transparent. All right, so I'm going to use this as a base, and now I'm going to start building out the cup to the best of my ability using this digital program here. So one thing I'm going to start doing is the color, right? So especially we have some orange. Oh, I have the eraser. Okay, I have some orange here. Obviously this metal has a lot of chromatic oranges in it. So I'm going to start with those colors and, really rework the shape as well. So I'm pulling out, I'm just going to, better shape some of these highlights. They were done quickly. This one has to be, well, I guess that could be a fat one. All right, let's put in some of the orange because that's just going to give us some clarity. So, it's an orange, it's fairly chromatic and also dark. And we were just talking about how that could be a little tricky. And it's tempting when people see metal, they tend to be like, oh, white, right? But what makes something shiny? We see shininess when something really light is next to something really dark. So one thing, for example, that's happening on this back edge is that we have a little bit more of this orange, and I can even go more chromatic. That's too neutral. You know, we have this orange here, and it's surrounded by our dark, right? So this disappears except for the very skinny bit of rim, right? So we get this shiny effect because we have something that's lighter around something that's darker. And the very back is also very chromatic, but it's a warmer orange back here. Not quite that chromatic. Okay, so we're going to put this in. No, it needs to be more yellow. And I think that could be a little more chromatic too. Let's take the chroma up a notch. You know, if you think gold, you'll never get gold. You know, gold is often orange or a green next to each other. The front is much more of a greeny yellow. The back is much more of an orangey yellow. But if you think about it as gold, you'll never make it. If you want something to read as a shiny gold, you need light next to dark. That's what creates the shiny effect. All right, so let's clean this up a little bit.
And at the end of the day, it's a constellation of highlights.
It is.
Somebody very clever told me that.
Oh, you're gonna make me. I'm gonna have this go to my head in no time. No one's ever accused me of being clever before.
Oh, yeah. I love the fact that it's an accusation.
All right, so we're just kind of cleaning up this this highlight. Oh, that was a little too much here. And then, you know, really, we don't need the skinny white everywhere. We can really, what is it doing? Sometimes, you know, if you touch down on the iPad while you're making an adjustment, actually, I like that one. It's over here that it can disappear a little bit. Okay, so these are just small adjustments. That was too much. It's just, it has a slight moment where it dissolves slightly, but I'm trying to, it's a subtle effect, but we're working on big ideas today, so we're not going to fuss too much. Okay, and then it does get skinnier. It has a little bit of light here that dips down. Another thing about highlights is highlights have gesture, and you know, people think of highlights as dots, but they're not dots. They have their own shape. They have their own gesture. They have their, you know, they get thick and thin. You know, so I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. You know, so you know, try to be mindful of what the effect actually is. So this comes down into a yellow right at the very, and a lighter yellow than that. You know, it's tempting to read this little bit as white on this top here, but it's really a touch of a light yellow. All right. And now that I have the light yellow, you know, this highlight really, you know, starts coming in before it gets really bright on this edge with some dark orange on it. So highlights have color movements, metal has color movements, but if you want something to read shiny, it has a gesture. Case in point, I just made this very up and down here, right? But it's not. Look how it's actually on an angle over here. So, you know, if you're mindful of the gesture of your highlights, of your lights and darks, you'll get a more believable final effect. And it has a little bit of this yellow in it as well. It's not white over here. It's this little bit of yellow. Okay, so do you see how methodically we're working? But if you just look at this bit up close, that looks like insanity, right? But as soon as we see it in context, do you see how we're starting to get the shiny effect? I guess I need a lighter color here. We're starting to get the shiny effect that we want from over here. One thing I'm seeing is this white is extending too far. So let's clean up a little bit. You know, this shiny white doesn't really start till over here. And it's not so fat. There we go. All right, little things, little gestures, little subtlety. And you know what? We don't have to describe anything over here, right? It disappears entirely because it's glass, right? So, you know, a mistake a lot of students make when they paint glass is they I better get a new layer before I ruin this. You know, they will be like, okay, here's the lid and here's, you know, but if you define everything, you no longer have glass. Glass is about a constellation of highlights. Say it again for the back. It's a constellation of highlights, people.
I tell you, I got to say the one of the things I say to my students all the time is, even if you're a landscape painter or you're a portrait painter, whatever kind of painter you typically are, go and do something different. Go and paint a glass. Go and paint, you know, just like you're doing. And then what you get used to doing is abstracting what you're seeing into shapes of color that have edges.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're doing here, and it's great to see. And I'm going to be painting a glass straight after this session, that's for sure.
I love this, you know, and I want to be clear. I didn't make this up, right? Like, I picked little bits and pieces, like this idea of a constellation. I learned from a man named 𝗠𝗹𝘀𝘆, who ran an atelier just in the Boston area. And he has a YouTube channel, which is amazing. I encourage you to check it out. 𝗍𝗶𝘁𝘆, 𝗍𝗶𝘁𝘆. I studied with him for 1.5 or 2 years or so. I also studied with Julia Aristides for 4 years, right? And she was the one that taught me that highlights have a gesture, right? So I'm not making this up. I've just collected a bunch of information and sharing it in a grouping with you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we got about 10 minutes. So
oh my goodness. Okay. Well, we're not going to finish this, but I hope that we can get far enough. Far enough to get the gist. So I'm going to work a little bit on this front rim, and then I'm going to stop worrying about the gold part and really, this is actually a really cold yellow. So do you see how warm my yellow was? And that this is actually really cold over here. Like much more of a lemon yellow. And then it has some darkness on the inside that we want to get. And, you know, highlights also have hard and soft edges. This side over here is actually softer, and this side over here is creating a hard edge. So that's another challenge to learn how to do. You know, it's like any paint handling, you know, between acrylic or oil or whatever your, oops, that's not what I wanted. You know, creating hard and soft edges, you know, takes experience and time with any media, whether it's digital or analog. I want something more neutral over here. That's too dark. Okay, but I want to get caught up in this gold too much. I want to really get the glass, because that's the point of today's demo. All right, I'm just going to clean this up a touch, and then we're going to ignore. Do you see how just getting the shape of the ellipse in there made such a difference? Here's without that last mark. That was just kind of getting the color. And here is, oh, come on, come back. It was so good. I don't want to do it again. I guess I'm gonna have to do it again. You know, when you get the shape of the ellipse, that makes sense with the top of the ellipse, right? And I can even clean up a little bit back here as well. You know, and we don't have to draw the whole ellipse to imply the ellipse. And this could be just a touch curvier, I think. All right. And same on the bottom, you know, we can clean it up a little bit to read. Okay. All right. We get the idea with the gold. Gold is shiny. It also has highlights, but it's on some glass. So let's start dealing with the glass bit. So one thing is I want to get the shape and the edges, you know, of some of these highlights. This is a window being reflected into the glass. I want to get the shape carefully drawn. It looks like it can go a little bit bigger. And when you're painting analog too, use this idea of cutting into highlights. You can get such a sharp edge if you put your light a little bigger than you think it is, and then just really cut into it. It's really effective for getting a nice sharp edge. Okay, this highlight also has some color. It's reflecting some of the green outside. It's kind of a neutralized green over here. You know, so the highlight has color to it, and I often will layer 2 or 3 colors in a highlight. Some people say just put down white, but both arguments are valid, because highlights are often brighter than the white paint that you have, right? And if you add a color to your white, you're actually darkening the paint a little bit. So you're losing the value, but you're gaining the chroma, you know, the color in the white. So it's valid to say I'm using white for highlights because I'm going after the value and I'm going to sacrifice the chroma. And it's also valid to say, I'm going to add the color into my highlights because I would rather have the chroma or the color than the value. Even though I'm darkening the value and it's already too dark, I'd rather have the color than the value. And both are valid arguments. It really comes down to personal preference. But you know what? The camera's going to do it for you, right? You're not going to get to choose. The camera chooses for you. So be mindful of that. Okay, I'm going to pick, so for this translucency, you know, that we're talking about where we actually see the glass because it's curving away from us and there's enough density for the glass to actually show. Some people are like, oh, I need transparent paint, right? That's one way to do it, but there's also a color here. It's just a mid-tone. You know, this is just like a mid-tone, kind of this greeny color I already have, right? So I'm going to start, you know, shaping this in over here, and then it's kind of a greeny tone, and then it gets a little bit warmer. So let's kind of shift it warm, you know, and it's just this middle value that's creating that milky effect, and it gets a little bit lighter as it goes down. The more glass that's reflecting through itself, the lighter it's going to get. You know, so mix the color that you need, right? You know, as it gets less transparent, you know, you can build, you know, just some, you know, building block to your dark or your background in this case. But, you know, creating that milky effect, I think it needs to be a little lighter. You don't have to use transparent paint. You can do it. This is called direct painting. Now you can also do it transparently. I could shave down, you know, my opacity here to, you know, really, maybe not that low, to create some of that milkiness. Let me bring this up and go a little bit colder. You know, you can also build transparencies, and that's valid too, right? But I want you to know that you can always directly paint any color that you want, right? It just, you're using softer edges, that kind of thing. So I'm going to clean this up because when we get the shape, you know, because it's a really hard edge here. I need to take my transparency back up. It's a really hard edge here. So just by cleaning this up and getting the shape more accurate, it's going to start feeling more like this glass. I made it come too far in. I need to cut more from the base and allow this to come out. You know, and this kind of thinking, I do this in painting, but, you know, like we were talking before, you don't always get to see these kinds of decisions easily in painting. So I'm hoping that doing it digitally today can help you understand the thought process that you can do, you know, in painting or otherwise, right? And I'm just going to pick an in-between color to transition this out. And, you know, I'm going to start using, sometimes if you're not sure, like there's a lot going on down here, right? So I'm going to build with kind of that milky transparent color that's a little dark. So I'm going to start transitioning from this dark into my, or sorry, from the light, and just build some lights up here. We have this kind of weird halo effect going on down here. You know, we have a lot of these kind of curvy highlights coming up out of it. And then there is a little bit, it's fairly dark, but it's lighter than what's around it, you know, in this middle area here. So I'm just going to fill in this color here. Now, again, we're going back and forth because you guys are seeing this picture and I still have the ability to see the original, which is how I usually prefer to work. And this lightness in the middle here is much like you could do without it looking at the original, right? It's much more subdued. It's not that important of a piece, part of the piece. I'm just gonna, you know, there's some lights and shadows playing off of each other down here, but this white, I want to redo the constellation on top of this darkness. So I'm covering it up. This is what I would do if I were painting, you know, with oil painting. I'm going to, you know, cover up a lot of this and then reestablish the highlights on top.
And you could have potentially started off this, even if you're painting in oil, just paint the background with your constellation of highlights in acrylic and then just work over the top.
Absolutely.
you know, nice and thinly.
That is absolutely true. You know, it's just layers, and, you know, oil painters might have needed to let it dry in between. You know,
Yeah.
the advantage of our acrylic friends here is
Yeah.
that they have the faster drying paint. Now I'm using a scribble, whereas if this was wet paint, I would just be working it, you know, into my wet paint to create these in between, but I'm using kind of a scribble effect with this media.
Yeah.
But you know, you just build it up. You know, especially when there's a lot going on down here. You don't have to draw every single thing. You just need the overall effect, right?
It's one of the elements of painting that continues to fascinate me, which is how when you abstract shapes and you put them down faithfully, they get recreated onto a canvas in 3 dimensions. And you're like, this is such a cool thing we do.
You know, it brings me joy every time. It's my reason for being a painter,
Yeah.
you know? I
The
love that.
magic trick.
It totally is a magic trick, but it's one that's accessible to anybody, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, like I said before, I didn't come up with this, right? I learned it and I practiced it, and now I can share it, you know, with others. But there's no talent fairy that bought me on the head, but I did spend the time to train with, and here's the key here. You can't just train with anybody. If you want to draw and paint realistically, you have to train with people that draw and paint realistically. So many times I have students come to me being like, oh, I can't paint. I tried art lessons for a year and I didn't get any better. And I'm like, well, did you train with somebody who had the skills, or did you, like, you know, if you go train with an abstract painter, you're not going to learn how to do this, right? So, you know, it's really important that you're mindful of who you are, you know, training with, who are your instructors. I don't like that. And I think it was just too bright there. I need a darker highlight color. There's this little, you know, roundness underneath. Oops.
And just so you know, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to the end of the glass, but we just got a few more minutes left.
Ah, okay. All right. I love this orange highlight over here, so I want to get at least that in. Which is being caused by a reflection of a wood stool that's next to it. And look how glass will amplify a chroma note, right? So I'm going to get this in, and it does have a transition. I'm going to use that scribble effect to show the transition, just to, actually, I'm going to use transparency as a cheat here to show this transition. If I were oil painting, I'd be mixing that neutralized dark orange. And then, of course, we have to shape it. It doesn't look right until you shape it, right? Yeah. Shape is so important with highlights, and highlights all have a specific shape. Don't just put a dot down and say that you made a highlight. What shape is your highlight?
And what gesture does it have? I've learned that today too.
Yes. Definitely the gesture. Okay, so this highlight over here is much too bright. Oh, you can't see it when I circle it with, let me circle it with a color I'm intending to put in there. This highlight here is way too bright, right? It's out of order. It's much darker. And let's go. And it has a soft edge. Do you see how harshly I just cut that? So I'm going to take the transparency down to create a soft edge. If I was doing this with paint, I would just soften this edge, you know, by combining the 2 colors on the canvas together. But we're using a new medium, so we need some techniques. I generally do not ever use glazing in my oil painting practice. I'll occasionally scumble, which can give you a glaze effect. I'm trying to scribble and it's not working. I'm going to take the transparency down. But there's a gesture, right? It's leaning slightly to the left. It's kind of comma-like a reverse comma. And it has like a little hook. Okay. So we just really want to be mindful of, you know, where's the hard edge? Where's the soft edge? What's the gesture? What's it doing? You know, we want all the things. We want it all. We want to be greedy, right? And we don't want to get obsessed with perfection, but if you feel that nagging feeling in your head of, oh, that's good enough, then you can do better, in my opinion, right? If you're like seeing something and you keep going back to it, and then you're eventually like, oh, that's good enough, it means that there's something there that you haven't quite learned yet, and that you're on the cusp of understanding. Your eye is telling you there's something there that you haven't considered yet.
But of course, the joy of doing this in Procreate is you have an undo button.
Oh yes, I have literally, ever since I started painting in Procreate, I've tried to do the 2-tap undo on my painting, like on a physical painting, because you get so spoiled. Okay, well, I'm afraid this is as far as we're going to get today, and I think this is a good stopping point for us. But I hope everybody has been able to get in a few new ideas about how they can paint glass today.
Well, Mandy Theis, that was great, and it's such a good reminder. As I said, even if you're not a glass painter, a painter of glass objects, just try it out.
Absolutely.
Try doing this, like try abstracting, because it is so useful. It's like when I rarely paint figures. I mean, sometimes they're in my paintings, but going to life drawing class, it's good to get your kick every now and then. And it's good to go, well, I'm just going to try and abstract what I see into shapes of color. So
absolutely,
thank you for that.
And I'd like to point out too, like maybe the reason you don't paint glass is because you were intimidated or didn't have a way to approach it, right? So are you not painting glass because it doesn't interest you, or are you not painting glass because you didn't have ideas of how to tackle it?
There you go. And one other thing I'll just say about reflections in general, because I mean, I paint a lot of creeks and a lot of streams, and they've got those reflections. And what I like about what you were saying about painting the glass from life, it's almost like if the reflection isn't in exactly the place you want it, you can just move a little bit.
Yes.
And it all shifts around, and you've got that like beautiful kaleidoscope. So do try it from life, everyone.
Oh, it's such a joy to paint from life. And if you have trouble getting like circular objects, please go check that previous video out. And I also have many great resources on the School of Atelier Arts YouTube channel. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram at Mandy Fine Artist.
That's it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Everyone go straight to the schoolofatelierarts.com and go check it out. And also, if you're interested in the work that I do, go check out at Charlie Easton on Instagram. I also actually have a new video out with Streamline. So there you go. Thank you, Amandine. There's it's on painttube.tv, mastering acrylic landscapes. I actually paint some water in there, so there's probably a bit of reflection in there. But oh yeah, what else am I going to talk about? Oh yeah, if you haven't signed up for Gouache Live, it's time to do that. There's actually some really cool people going to be painting on Gouache Live. Gouache is a great medium for getting out there and painting water with. And also, I don't know if you've seen some of the glass work that is done by some of the gouache artists, but incredible stuff, especially when you can layer in some of the translucencies like you can in gouache. So check out Gouache Live. What else am I going to talk about? Yeah, don't forget to subscribe to this channel on Instagram at Art School Live, and tag Eric at Eric Rhodes on any Instagram post that you make on the back of your demonstrations or your works that you do from the demos. Thank you for joining me for today. Thank you to Mandy Theis for joining me and doing such a great demo. We've got some really cool people going to be joining me this week, a few from up here in Canada. So I can't wait to introduce you to some new artists. And yeah, we're going to have fun this week. So I'll be back here tomorrow. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you to Mandy again, and we will see you tomorrow.